friends. This month we are working on a solo theme and variation arrangement of the classic tune St James Infirmary, also known as the Gambler's Blues to many people in the US. Now, this is a simple minor blues 8-bar arrangement, so it's a great vehicle for us to try out some different techniques and see how we can treat the melody differently without having the tune become boring, as it is only 8 bars long. So let's jump right in. The first little intro section that we have here is 4 bars long, and we see a whole grouping of 16th notes here, which we might think of as something hard, but this is a very specific technique. What we are doing here is what's called a classical tremolo, and this comes from the classical guitar world. So what we are doing is we are actually playing the melody with our thumb on our lower strings while having a constant note pulsing at the top, in this case our A string, which is the easiest way to make this happen. But I want to do, before we add in all of those 16th notes, is address just the ascending and descending melodic line that we use in the intro before we complicate things with all of the top notes. So what we'll be doing here, we'll be using our thumb for everything that is not on the A string, and that will become apparent as to why in just one moment. So we're starting out just doing a nice ascending line. We're going D on the 2nd fret of our C string, F on the 1st fret of our E string, and then we're going on up to the E on the 4th fret of our C string, and then going to the open G string. So we're ascending in thirds. So if we count it off, let's try this together. Just this first bar will sound a little bit something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now that's not so hard, right? So it's important to get this melody line under your fingers first before we add the tremolo in. Now as you go from there, we're just going to walk straight back down. We're going to go F, E, D, C sharp, all on our C string. So we'll go 5th fret, 4th fret, 2nd fret, 1st fret. So our first 2 bars will sound a little bit something like this. Good, and now you'll see that measure 3 is just a repetition of that melody line with the thumb. We're walking up again in our thirds. But then as we get to measure 4, we're getting into the main theme. We have a pickup note here of a D and an F on beats 3 and beats 4. So we'll have the 2nd fret of our C string and then the 1st fret after we walk down. So bars 3 and 4 with just the thumb melody line will sound like this. Go back up to that F, and that's leading us back into the main theme. Now the question is, how do we add in this classical tremolo at the top? So you'll see that we have, on the downbeat of each note, we have our melody that we just played, and after that what we're going to do is we're going to take our ring finger, middle finger, and 1st finger and play quickly just in succession on the A string. So we can practice this just by hitting the D, our 1st note in the melody series on the 2nd fret. We'll put down a D minor chord, 2, 2, 1, open, and we can practice like this, nice and slow. Let's just pretend that they're all quarter notes for the moment. So it'll be thumb, ring, middle, 1st. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now obviously it's going to take some time to build up the speed with our right hand to get the tremolo technique in here that should ultimately sound like this. And one other thing that we need to focus on when we're doing the tremolo is that the thumb notes are our melody notes. Our thumb notes need to be more prominent and louder. We can be very, very light with the ring finger, middle finger, and 1st finger as we go through this. So let's try just these first 4 bars very slowly together. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now as we move on to measure 5, we're finally beginning to play the actual melody of St. James Infirmary. And we're going to do this by not using the A string at all, as we're going to continue the tremolo on our A string the entire time. So let's just look a little bit at the thumb movement, hear what the melody sounds like so we can really place it accurately in the pattern. So again, we'll still be doing essentially quarter notes with our thumb, just every single downbeat. We're going to put down our D minor chord, and this is all we're going to need for the vast majority of the A section of this tune. Although we have chord changes, most of the notes that we need are contained right in this D minor chord. We only have a few little movements as we go around that we'll get to in just one moment. So if we look at measure 5, all we're doing is striking 2 A's, the 2nd fret of our G string, and then we're going to lift up the middle finger so we have the open G, and then go right back to the A. So that first bar will sound like this. So we have that melody in there. Now you'll note, if you are familiar with the melody of the tune, it goes, I went down to St. James Infirmary. As we have that, you'll note that the second A that we articulate here is not actually in the melody, but we're giving the illusion of sustain. So this second A on the second beat should be a little bit lighter than the first one, so that the melody really pops out. So if we start on beats 3 and 4, the measure before, it would sound like this. And listen to where the melody is placed and what notes are louder than others. And likewise, as we get to measure 6, we have the same thing. We really have a half note sustaining on that D on the 2nd fret of our C string. So beat 2 again will be nice and light. And then you see in beats 3 and 4 of this measure, we have the identical melodic pattern going D to F again, just as we did in the pickup to bar 5. And if we look at bar 7, we resolve down. We're still on this nice D minor chord, but this is finally where we're going to have to change when we get to the B flat. So we have our 2 A's again. So there's all these A's right in a row. And our B flat chord, we would usually play something like a B flat 6th, like this. But the notes here are D and then F. Now we're unable to play these on our A string because of the continuous tremolo going on. So what we're going to do is we're going to voice the D on the 7th fret, slide up just with your middle finger to the 7th fret of your G string, and then your B flat is going to be under your first finger on the 8th fret, the 6th fret, I'm sorry, of your E string. So here is measure 7, nice and slowly. And then we resolve right back down to the middle finger, which is still on the G string, just down to the 2nd fret. But now we're going to voice an A chord. So we have 2, 1, open, open, because we're going to create a little moving bass line here to lead us into the final 4 bars of the form. So as we come down to this A chord, we're going to walk up with our thumb, still keeping the tremolo going. So we'll go A on the 2nd fret of our G string, 1st fret, that note's already down for the A chord. And then we have the same pickup, D, F, 2nd fret of our C string, 1st fret of our E string. And then as we go on, measure 9 is an exact repetition of bar 5 that we have already played. You can see that the changes, we've already gone over pretty much all of the chord changes we need for this tune. And then as we get down to measure 10, it's almost the same as what's directly above it, but when we come off the F and down to the D, we're going to stay here and just allow this D on the 2nd fret of our C string to sustain throughout the entire measure. And then our melody in bar 11 is really F, then E, and then we resolve down to a D. And this is over our B flat chord and then to our A 7th chord. But for our B flat chord, really we have what we need down with the D minor already. We don't need to change anything here because we're only playing the 2nd fret of our C string and the 1st fret of our E string. So bar 11, we will play the 1st fret of our E string, 2nd fret of our C string, open E, then C sharp on the 1st fret of our C string, and then we'll resolve to the D minor, playing F on the 1st fret of your E string, and then we go up to an A7 sharp 5, which we've played many times on this channel before. That means that we're going to have our regular A7, open, 1, open, open. We're going to place our second finger on E sharp on the first fret of our E string. And we have a fermata above this note, so we'll just let that ring out. Now let's try those first 8 bars of the A section nice and slowly together. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now in measure 13, or letter B, we're getting into really the more typical version of the tune that people know. This is going to present our main melody in a more accessible fashion than we just did with this nice foreboding tremolo technique. So we're going to strum through this entire section with a few plucked notes in between. You'll see that we have a pickup bar. In measure 12, we have beat 4, we have the D and the F, the same pickup that we played previously getting into the A section, the second fret of our C string, and the first fret of our E string. And then as we do this, you want to have the D minor down already, as we're going to use this in just a moment. As we have this pickup, we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, and strum right through your D minor chord. Now you'll see in measure 13 that we have what looks like a lot of partial strums. And really what I've done here is tried to notate as best we can what's really known as a shuffle strum. And I'll link to a full tutorial on that down in the description as well. But essentially our downstrokes are only going to hit just a little bit of the top strings, the G and C. And then with all our upstrokes, we're just lightly going to hit the bottom 2 strings. So this isn't precise. But what's going to happen is we're going to have the melody notes that we need really popping out. So this measure only has 2 chords. We have a D minor and then A 7th, and in bar 14 we're going right back to a D minor chord. So bar 13 is going to sound a little bit something like this. I'm going to do it really slowly so you can see and hear the partial strums that are in here. And I'll give the pickup as well. So it's just 2 beats of D minor, 2 beats of A 7th. And then we resolve right back to our D minor chord. But you'll see on the offbeat here, we're going to pluck the second fret of our C string, or a D. So as we have the D minor down, that note's already there. The question is, how are we going to do that with our right hand? As this is where would be an up strum, as it's an offbeat, we want to try to tackle it in that way so that our wrist motion stays consistent. So what we'll do with our first finger, what I like to do, I'm doing these strum style techniques, is just keep the thumb lightly braced behind like this. And this is going to give us a lot more precision when we do these upstroke plucks. So you can practice this by just strumming down on the D minor and then plucking up on the D itself. And you can practice this really on all your strings to get the facility to pluck any of the individual notes that you would like. And you see that we have the same exact technique on the last offbeat, or the end of 4 in measure 14 as well, just on the F on our E string. So we're really just sitting here on the D minor chord the entire time. We don't have a whole lot going on. Let me play bar 14 for you and listen very closely to this. I'll do it quite slowly. So we just have these little individual notes in here that we eke out of the chord without needing to change anything with our left hand. And this all really comes down to precision with the right hand, which comes in time as we practice. Now the next bar is not so bad. We just need to get the melody, as we talked about in the A section, over that B flat chord. But we'll be able to use more common voicings now to do that. For the first 2 beats of this measure of bar 15, we are going to just strum our D minor chord. And then we're going to play our B flat 6th chord. And we're going to do this in 2 different positions so that the melody note is changing. If you remember, our melody note is the D and then the B flat right here resolves down to the A. So we have 2 D minors. And then we're going to play our B flat 6th up on the 5th fret. It'll be open, 5, 6, 5. And that gets us our D right on top, so we can just strum right through. And then we're gonna come down to a B flat 6th chord that you're probably more familiar with, which is the root position one, which is open, 2, 1, 1, like this. So this measure will sound a little bit something like this. Resolve to an A7th. All right, now as we get through this, the A7th, we see that we have a very specific picking pattern over top of this, and this is our split stroke, which I'll also link to a full tutorial breakdown of this, but pay very close attention to the strumming pattern that you use for this measure. Over this A7th chord, our split stroke is going to sound like this: down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up. So we have those concurrent downstrokes to give us this syncopated sort of feel, although we were actually just strumming straight 8th notes at this point. And you'll see on the last full strum of that A7th chord that we are now making it again that A7th sharp 5, open, 1, 1, open. So here's bar 16 for you. So we just have that F for one beat. And why do we have that? Well, actually, it's an E sharp in this case, or we can call it an F if we want. They're enharmonic equivalents. But we have that there because remember that we have a pickup going to the final 4 bars of the form that includes that F. So we're giving a nod back to the original melody by adding this sharp 5 in there. Now, as we move on, you'll see measure 17, much like the tremolo section, is identical to what we did above it in bar 13. And then we have things a little bit different. In bar 18, we're going to strum down our D minor and again pluck up on the D like that, much as we did above. But after we strum the D minor again, we're just going to move our ring finger up to the E flat on the 3rd fret of our C string, making this an F7th chord. And the reason we're using this F7th chord here, it's not necessary, many versions of the tune do not have this, but the F7th chord is our dominant or 5 chord that leads our ear directly to that B flat chord that we're about to play. So it's just about giving more of a sense of motion. And you'll note that it's only one different from our D minor chord, only one single half step difference. So there's not a big change between the chords, but it gives us a much stronger sense of motion. Now as we get to bar 19, we're going to have a B flat to our A7th chord. So 2 beats on each one. But the key here is that we're not going to play our outer strings, we're going to mute them. And that's going to give us our melody notes, which are F and E, but enable us to strum all the way through the chord. So we'll voice this open, 2, 1, open, and then you can just lay your ring finger across the 3rd fret of your G string, nice and lightly, and likewise your pinky can go on the 3rd fret of the A string. So as we strum through, you only hear the middle strings, but we don't actually have to worry about isolating the notes, which can be kind of a pain, especially with these inner strings. So we're going to play our B flat, the open, 2, 1, open, twice, and then we're going to go to our A7th, but we'll keep these outer strings muted. And on beat 4, we will put down that sharp 5 again, the 1st fret of our E string. Now, if you happen to get a little sound out of the G and A strings, it's not really a big deal and no one's really going to notice what's going on there, so it's not a huge deal. And then as we resolve back, we're going to go just 2 downstrokes on our D minor chord, and then we're going to have 1 beat of an 8th note triplet on our A7th and 1 beat of an 8th note triplet on our A7 sharp 5. And I'll link again below to the triplet technique that we're using here, but very quickly it is down with the 1st finger, drag the thumb behind and up with the 1st finger. So here's bar 20 for you with those triplets nice and slow. So it'll be D minor, A7th, A7 sharp 5. And again, that sharp 5, the E sharp or the F, is giving us that pickup to get back to the top of the form one more time. So let's give this a shot, starting at letter B, nice and slowly together. 1, 2, 3. Now at letter C or bar 21, what I've done here is a simple chord melody solo using the changes of St. James Infirmary. When we're playing through a tune, we generally don't want to just repetitiously repeat the melody over and over again. We can play with that inside the constraints of the harmony. So the chords will be exactly the same, but we're creating now just a new simple melody over top to give a little movement to the tune. So we're starting out on our D minor chord as we started before with 8th note strums. And then on beat 2, we're going to move up to a D minor 7th, which is giving us a melody note of a C under the 3rd fret of our A string. And then we're going up to an A 7th in 2nd inversion, or over top of an E. So it'd be open, 4, 3, 4. Again, 8th notes. Here's our first 3 beats. Nice and easy. And then we're going to go up to a 3rd inversion, which will be open 7, 5, 7. Now this is still an A 7th chord. They're all A 7th chords, just different inversions of them. We're starting on a different bass note, which enables us to put a different treble note above. So our melody line moving is something like that. You see that we have that triplet rhythm again over top of this last A 7th chord. So here is bar 21. All right, and then we go on to a D minor 7th chord, but this is going to look like a lot like an F major chord to you at first. So it's going to bar over the 5th fret. We're going to put our pinky on the 8th fret, so we have an F up top. And we're going to walk this on down. So we're going to go 8, 7, and we're just going to strum on that off beat. We're going to hit our D minor 7th chord, just barred straight across the 5th fret. So it'll sound like this. So we get that nice syncopated sound as we reach the D minor, resolving to the D note on the 5th fret of our A string on the offbeat of beat 2. And then we're going to hold that out for one full beat, meaning that our next stroke is going to be an upstroke over this A 7th chord. What we'll do is we'll put down our root position A 7th chord that you're all familiar with, open, 1, open, open. We're going to put the pinky on the C sharp of your A string, the 4th fret, and then walk on down, 4, 2, open. And remember, this is an offbeat. And then we're getting right back in there to our D minor chord. So as we have our D minor chord, remember that we had that B flat 6th before in the 3rd bar, but now we're going to substitute a D diminished 7th chord here. And you might ask, why can we do that? Well, if you recall, our melody notes, or the first one is really a D, and really, this is very close to a B flat 7th chord that we're playing, right? But we're now barring on the 4th fret, so it'll be 4, 5, 4, 5. Like this. And then up to the F, just slide that same position up to the 8th fret. So here's bar 21, D minor, and then we have these to a D minor 7th, so the 3rd fret, and then we walk on up to the diminished chord. So we're walking all the way up that little diminished arpeggio there on a D. And then we're coming down. We're going to leave that melody note right where it is on the 8th fret of our A string. But we're going to use that 2nd inversion chord again for the A 7th. But now we're adding a sharp 5, another E sharp. So it will be open, 7, 5, 8. Just for the first 2 beats. Down, up, and then we resolve down to the 7th fret, our E, so just a regular A 7th. And then we're going to walk down. We're going to have a funky little position because we want to get a D melody note here to walk us down. So that's the 5th fret. So we'll have open, 7, 5, 5, just for half a beat. And then we're sliding right down to our 2nd inversion, A 7th, open, 4, 3, 4. Now as we get to bar 25, we're going to resolve again to the D minor 7th, because remember, although we're playing with the melody, the harmonic structure stays the same. The chords are always the same. That's the vehicle that we use to create these simple chord melody solos. So we resolve to a D minor 7th, barred across the 5th fret, and walk down to our A 7th in 2nd inversion, open, 4, 3, 4. Then down to our root position D minor 7th, 2, 2, 1, 3. And then slide up our ring finger to the E flat on the 3rd fret of our C string, to make it an F7, so we're going to go to a B flat in one moment. But what we're going to do here is actually anticipate the chord changes. So we're going to make the chord changes a half beat before the rest of the band would, adding just a little bit more drive and tension to the song. So bars 25 and 26 have a consistent rhythm, and it's going to sound a little bit something like this. You hear how it's the same rhythm over and over again. We're just getting to those up strums one beat faster than we would for the chord change. And you'll see over the F7 we have a retard written, which means that we're going to slow down here because we're getting kind of to the closing of the tune. After this F7th, we're going to play a nice slow B flat 7th. So 1, 2, 1, 1, just barred across the first fret, 2 strums, then A 7th, and then A 7th sharp 5. So bar 27 is going to sound like this. And then over that A7 sharp 5, we have another of those fermatas. We're just going to hold out that note for one moment. So now let's try adding that. So all of letter C together. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now as we resolve to the D minor chord, you'll see that we're going back to our tremolo technique. One great thing when you're arranging is to give a sense of consistency and bringing it back home. So what I've done here is brought us back to the original technique that we're doing. This is really just the intro of the tune with a slight variation. So you'll see that we have that ascending thirds line again. 2, 1, 4, open, and then walk down 5, 4, 2, 1. And we'll repeat that one more time, but the last time we're going to end this on a D major chord. And the reason that we're going to do this is what's called a Picardy third, and it gives just a bigger sense of closure and resolution than we had if we resolved to a D minor. So in the last bar of the piece, we're going to play D, F sharp on the 2nd fret of our E string, A on the 2nd fret of our G string, and then we'll strum through the entire D major chord 2, 2, 2, 5. On the last beat there. So the last measure will sound a little bit something like this after we have our ascending and descending lines. Let's try that whole outro section together. 1, 2, 3, 4. Thank you so much for joining me for this lesson. I hope you've enjoyed it and gotten a little something out of it. As always, if you have any questions, please do drop them in the comments below or just shoot me an email. I'm always happy to clarify things if I can or give you some more advice if it will help you. If you'd like the tabs to this tune, they're available for my Patreon subscribers. We do a new lesson like this each month, as well as weekly lessons and arrangements and chord charts every single week. I'll see you all over there.